He stepped into the hospital's chapel just to clear his mind, but the woman praying beneath the stained glass heart whispered a name he hadn't heard aloud in 30 years. Michael. The same name she gave the baby she abandoned here. The same name on his badge. For a moment he thought fate had handed him closure, but then a code blue tore through the speakers. She was dying, and saving her might cost him everything. Want to know what happened? Watch until the end for a story full of emotion and unexpected twists. Also, tell us which city you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Dr. Michael Andrews moved through the bustling corridors of Boston Mercy Hospital with the practiced efficiency of someone who had called these halls home for 15 years. His white coat, adorned with the hospital's emblem, billowed slightly as he rushed between patient consultations. At 45, he was at the pinnacle of his career, a renowned cardiac surgeon whose steady hands had saved countless lives. The crisp October morning brought with it the beginning of Founders Week, an annual tradition where Boston Mercy invited anyone born at the hospital to return for celebration and commemoration. Colorful banners hung from the ceilings, and volunteers in bright blue vests guided visitors through tours of the historic institution. Michael had always avoided these festivities, scheduling conferences or surgical procedures that required his absence. But this year, an emergency bypass surgery had forced him to cancel his keynote address at a prestigious medical conference in Chicago. Now, he found himself trapped amid the nostalgia and revelry he'd so carefully evaded for years. Dr. Andrews, would you mind directing this lovely lady to the chapel? A volunteer approached him, gesturing toward an elderly woman leaning heavily on a wooden cane. Of course, Michael replied with a polite smile. I'm heading that way myself. The woman, her silver hair neatly pinned back, introduced herself as Anna Wilson. As they walked slowly together, she explained that she had come for Founders Week, though not because she had been born there. I delivered a baby here many years ago, she said, her voice wavering slightly. But I wasn't able to keep him. I was so young, you see, barely 18. Michael nodded sympathetically, having heard many such stories throughout his career. But something about Anna's gentle demeanor and the sadness in her eyes tugged at him. The chapel was quiet when they arrived, illuminated by stained glass that cast patterns of ruby and sapphire across the wooden pews. Anna settled herself into a seat near the front, her arthritic hands clutching her purse tightly. Would you like a moment alone? Michael asked. Actually, doctor, would you mind sitting with me for just a minute? There's something peaceful about having company in prayer, even a stranger's. Michael checked his watch. His next surgery wasn't for another hour. Of course, he said, sliding into the pew beside her. As the silence settled around them, Anna closed her eyes and began to whisper, her voice barely audible in the hushed chapel. Lord, I've come back to this place after 30 years to seek forgiveness for what I had to do. My baby boy would be a grown man now, maybe with children of his own. I named him Michael, after my father. I hope wherever he is, he understands. I had no choice. I left him here because I knew they would find him a better life than I could give. Michael's blood ran cold. His hands, which had performed the most delicate of surgeries with unwavering steadiness, now trembled in his lap. October 12th. Founders Week always fell on his birthday week. Michael, abandoned at Boston Mercy 30 years ago. The coincidence was too precise to ignore. He was looking at the woman who had given him life, and then given him away. Thunder rumbled outside as Michael stared at Anna, his mind racing with questions. The revelation left him paralyzed, unable to speak or move. This woman, this stranger, had just unwittingly confessed to being his birth mother. The weight of 30 years of wondering crashed down upon him in an instant. Are you all right, doctor? Anna asked, noticing his pallor. You look as though you've seen a ghost. Before he could formulate a response, his pager buzzed insistently at his hip. With trembling fingers, he checked the display. Mandatory staff meeting in 10 minutes. A perfect excuse to escape this overwhelming moment. I'm sorry, I have to go. He managed, rising quickly. Hospital business. Anna smiled gently. Of course. Thank you for sitting with me. It meant more than you know." The irony of her words wasn't lost on him as he hurried from the chapel, his heart pounding against his ribs. In the corridor, he leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. Could it really be her? After all these years of wondering, of creating fantasies about why he'd been left, was the answer sitting just 20 feet away in the chapel. His adoptive parents had told him everything they knew, that he'd been found wrapped in a handmade blanket with daisies embroidered around the edges, a note tucked inside with just his first name, no last name, no explanation, no way to trace his origins. They'd given him a loving home, but they couldn't give him answers. The staff meeting was a blur of policy updates and scheduling changes. Michael nodded at appropriate intervals, but his mind remained in the chapel with Anna. As soon as the meeting concluded, he headed toward his office, determined to process what had happened in private. That's when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Code Blue Emergency Department. Code Blue Emergency Department. Michael quickened his pace, his personal crisis momentarily forgotten in the face of a medical emergency. In the ED, nurses and residents rushed around a gurney where an elderly patient was coding. His professional instincts kicked in as he pushed through the crowd, only to freeze when he recognized the patient. Anna Wilson lay unconscious, her skin ashen, as the ED team worked frantically to stabilize her. The cardiac monitor showed ventricular fibrillation, a chaotic heart rhythm that would be fatal without immediate intervention. "What happened?" Michael demanded. "She collapsed in the chapel," a nurse explained. "Possible myocardial infarction. BP's crashing and she's not responding to initial meds." Dr. Eric Lawson, the attending cardiologist on duty, glanced up. "We need to get her to the cath lab immediately. I'm thinking massive anterior wall MI." Michael's medical training warred with his personal turmoil. This woman needed immediate surgery, the kind of emergency bypass he had performed hundreds of times. But how could he operate on his own mother? The ethical implications were staggering. "I'll take the case," he heard himself say, even as his mind screamed at the impropriety of it. Lawson frowned. "Andrews, you look like hell. What's going on?" "Nothing. I'm fine." Michael moved to examine Anna's ECG. "And I'm the best cardiac surgeon on staff today. She needs me." As nurses prepped Anna for emergency transport, Michael faced an impossible choice: reveal the truth and recuse himself, or say nothing and potentially save the life of the mother who had once abandoned him. Lawson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Something's off with you, Andrews. I've known you for a decade, and I've never seen you this rattled." Michael hesitated, knowing hospital policy required physicians to recuse themselves from cases involving family members. But revealing his suspicions about Anna would mean delaying her critical care while another surgeon was called in, time she might not have. "I just missed breakfast," Michael lied. "Let's focus on the patient." As the team rushed Anna toward the cardiac surgical suite, Chaplain Harris fell into step beside Michael. The elderly chaplain had been sitting with Anna in the chapel when she collapsed. "She was so worried about finding her son," Harris explained. "She told me she came back to make amends before she died. Said she's been carrying the guilt for 30 years. The revelation struck Michael like a physical blow. She had come looking for him. In the pre-op area, a nurse handed Michael Anna's admission forms. Her medical history revealed advanced coronary artery disease that had gone untreated for years. Her emergency contact was listed as none. "Dr. Andrews?" The head nurse's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "We need a decision. Do we proceed?" The surgical team waited, gowned and ready. Anna's vitals continued to deteriorate on the monitor. Each passing minute reduced her chances of survival. Michael made his decision. Page the ethics committee for an emergency consult and get Dr. Winters as a second surgeon. While the team continued preparations, Michael stepped into a private room to speak with the ethics committee chair on speakerphone. He explained the EU situation, his suspicion that the patient might be his biological mother, based on her chapel confession. "This is highly irregular, Dr. Andrews," the committee chair responded. Policy clearly states you should recuse yourself. She needs immediate bypass surgery, Michael countered. I'm the most qualified surgeon available, and delaying treatment could be fatal. After tense deliberation, the committee granted a rare exception. Michael could perform the surgery, with Dr. Winters observing, on the condition that he submit to a full review afterward. As Michael scrubbed for surgery, Lawson appeared beside him. The ethics committee called me, he said coldly. This could damage the hospital's reputation, and yours. I've been working toward department chair for 5 years. I won't let your personal drama jeopardize that. The unspoken threat hung between them. Lawson had opposed Michael's recent nomination for a prestigious research grant, and now he had political ammunition. This isn't about you, Michael replied. It's about saving a life. In the operating room, Michael took a deep breath as Anna was wheeled in, now unconscious and intubated. The familiar routine of surgical preparation helped steady his hands. As the anesthesiologist reported her status, a violent storm outside caused the lights to flicker momentarily. Standing over the operating table, scalpel poised above Anna's chest, Michael felt the weight of 30 years of abandonment, anger, confusion, and longing. Through the surgical mask, he whispered words only he could hear. I'll save you, and then I need to know why you left me. The incision he made was perfect, just as he'd been trained. Whatever emotional turmoil raged inside him, his surgeon's hands remained steady and true as he prepared to repair the heart of the woman who had given him life. Rain hammered against the surgical suite's skylight as Michael worked with practiced precision. Anna's heart lay exposed, the damage more extensive than the scans had indicated. 3 major coronary arteries were severely blocked, and the left ventricle showed signs of previous damage. She's been walking around with a time bomb in her chest, Dr. Winters commented, peering over Michael's shoulder. It's a wonder she made it this long. Michael's mind flashed to all the birthdays he'd spent wondering if his birth mother was thinking of him. Had she been struggling with her heart even then, living each day with both literal and figurative pain? Harvesting the saphenous vein now, he announced, redirecting his focus to the procedure. The OR team moved in practiced coordination, anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning flashed, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the room into darkness, save for the emergency backup lighting. Generator should kick in momentarily, a nurse called out. Michael didn't pause. Headlamps, everyone. Continue monitoring vitals verbally until systems reset. For 90 tense seconds, they worked by the dim glow of emergency lights. The team, calling out vital signs, while Michael's hands remained steady inside Anna's chest. When the power finally surged back, alarms blared as multiple monitors rebooted. BP dropping, the anesthesiologist warned. She's not tolerating the bypass well. Michael felt sweat beading beneath his surgical cap. Push another unit of blood and increase the dopamine drip. His voice remained calm, despite the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Dr. Winters leaned closer. Andrews, if we lose her, we won't. Michael cut him off. The thought of Anna dying on his table, of losing his birth mother just hours after finding her, was unacceptable. Not when he had waited 30 years for answers. 4 hours into the surgery, they reached the critical point, removing Anna from the heart-lung machine to see if her repaired heart could function independently. The moment of truth in any bypass. Surgery, coming off bypass in 3, 2, 1. The surgical team held their collective breath as Anna's heart quivered, then began to beat on its own, tentatively at first, then with growing strength. Rhythm stabilizing, the anesthesiologist confirmed. Pressure coming up. Relief washed over Michael as he completed the final anastomosis with meticulous care. The grafts were holding, blood flowed through vessels that had been critically narrowed. Just hours before, as he began closing her chest, Michael allowed himself to examine Anna's face for the first time since beginning the surgery. With her features relaxed in unconsciousness, he searched for any resemblance to himself. The shape of her brow, perhaps, the slight upturn at the end of her nose. Good work, everyone, he said as he placed the final sutures. "She has a difficult recovery ahead, but she should make it." Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. "Impressive work under the circumstances, Andrews, though I suspect the Ethics Committee will have questions about your involvement." Outside the OR, Lawson waited with arms crossed. "The board wants to see you tomorrow morning," he said without preamble. "They're questioning your judgment in taking this case." Michael removed his surgical cap, exhaustion settling into his bones. "I just performed a quintuple bypass on a critical patient during a power outage. My judgment was fine. The conflict of interest was disclosed and approved by the Ethics Committee," Michael finished. "And more importantly, the patient is stable. That's what matters." As Lawson walked away, Nurse Emily Thompson approached with a sympathetic smile. "The woman from the chapel. There's something you should see in her personal effects." She handed him a worn leather wallet. Inside was a faded photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket with a distinct daisy pattern, the exact same pattern Michael had seen all his life on the blanket preserved in his adoption records. Michael stared at the photograph, his fingers trembling as they traced the daisy pattern. His adoptive parents had preserved that very blanket in a cedar chest, along with a handwritten note that had simply read, "His name is Michael. Please love him." "Where did you find this?" he asked. "Emily," his voice barely above a whisper. "It fell from her purse when we were collecting her belongings," Emily explained. "She's been carrying it for years, judging by the wear." Michael slipped the photo back into the wallet and returned it to Emily. "Make sure this goes back with her personal items." His professional mask slipped back into place, though his mind raced with implications. The recovery room buzzed with activity as nurses monitored post-operative patients. Michael checked Anna's charts meticulously, reviewing every number, every note. Her condition remained stable. The surgery had been successful despite the complications. "You should go home, Dr. Andrews," the charge nurse suggested gently. "You've been on your feet for nearly 20 hours. He nodded absently, but made no move to leave. How could he go home when the woman who had brought him into this world lay just a few feet away, fighting for her own life? Dawn was breaking when Chaplain Harris found Michael dozing in a chair beside Anna's bed. The elderly chaplain placed a hand on his shoulder, startling him awake. "Faith works in mysterious ways," Harris said quietly. "I've been at this hospital for 40 years, and I've never seen a reunion quite like this one." Michael rubbed his eyes. "We haven't exactly reunited. She doesn't know who I am, but you know who she is," Harris replied. "That's already a miracle, considering the odds." The hospital was waking up around them. Shift changes, breakfast carts, the steady rhythm of an institution devoted to healing. Bounder's week activities would continue despite the storm damage, with volunteers already setting up information booths in the main lobby. "The board meeting is in 2 hours, Harris reminded him. "Dr. Lawson has been quite vocal about what he calls your ethical breach," Michael sighed. "I followed protocol. I disclosed my suspicions to the Ethics Committee after you were already involved," Harris pointed out. "And there's talk about the National Heart Grant. Lawson believes you've given him grounds to challenge your candidacy." The prestigious grant would fund 5 years of groundbreaking cardiac research that Michael had dedicated his career to advancing. Losing it would mean abandoning projects that could save thousands of lives. "I made the right call," Michael insisted. "Anna needed immediate surgery, and I was the best surgeon available." "I don't disagree," Harris said kindly, "but the board might see it differently." As the chaplain left, Emily returned with Anna's morning medications. "She's been asking about the doctor who saved her," Emily reported. "She wants to thank you." "Is she lucid?" Michael asked, suddenly nervous at the prospect of facing Anna while she was conscious. "Very. The anesthesia has completely worn off." Emily studied his face curiously. "Dr. Andrews, forgive me for asking, but is there something personal between you and Mrs. Wilson? You've never stayed overnight with a patient before." Michael hesitated, then made a decision. Emily had been his most trusted nurse for years. The daisy blanket in that photo. I have the original at home. She's my birth mother, Emily. She left me at this hospital 30 years ago. Emily's eyes widened. Does she know? Not yet. Michael glanced toward Anna's room. And I'm not sure. If she should. She's in a fragile state, both physically and emotionally. She deserves to know, Emily said softly. And so do you. Everyone deserves to know where they came from. As a foster child herself, Emily spoke from experience. Michael knew she had spent years searching for her own birth parents, with no success. First, I need to survive this board meeting, Michael said, standing up. Then I'll decide what to tell Anna. But as he gathered his things to leave, Anna's monitors began to alarm. Her heart rhythm had suddenly become erratic, a potentially fatal complication following cardiac surgery. Rushing to Anna's bedside, Michael barked orders as the crash team assembled. Amiodarone, 150 milligrams, IV push. His eyes remained fixed on the monitor as the medication flowed into her veins. Within moments, her heart rhythm stabilized, settling back into a regular pattern. Post-operative arrhythmia, he explained to Emily, who had turned pale with worry. Common after bypass, but we'll need to adjust her medication. Once Anna was stable again, Michael hurried to his office to prepare for the board meeting. He hadn't been home in over 24 hours. His wrinkled scrubs and stubbled face would hardly make a favorable impression on the hospital administrators. The boardroom felt unnaturally quiet when Michael entered. 8 stern faces turned toward him, with Dr. Lawson sitting confidently at the far end of the polished table. Hospital Director Margaret Chen gestured for Michael to take a seat. Dr. Andrews, we've reviewed the initial ethics committee report regarding your emergency surgery on Mrs. Wilson, Director Chen began. While we acknowledge the committee granted provisional approval, there remain serious concerns about your judgment. Lawson leaned forward. According to hospital policy, specifically HIPAA Conflict of Interest Clause 12.4b, physicians must recuse themselves from cases involving personal relationships. Your suspicion that Mrs. Wilson might be your biological mother clearly constitutes such a relationship. Michael took a deep breath. I made my suspicions known to the ethics committee before beginning the surgery. Given Mrs. Wilson's critical condition, they approved my participation with supervision after you had already involved yourself, Lawson countered. The initial assessment in the ER occurred before disclosure. The debate continued for nearly an hour, with various board members questioning Michael's decision-making process. Throughout it all, he remained steadfast in his conviction that he had acted in his patient's best interest. The surgery was successful, he reminded them. Mrs. Wilson is alive because of my intervention. Director Chen sighed. No one is questioning your surgical skill, Dr. Andrews. The issue is one of professional boundaries and hospital liability. As the meeting approached its conclusion, Chaplain Harris knocked and entered, his expression grave. Pardon the interruption, he said, but I believe my testimony may be relevant to these proceedings. The board granted him permission to speak, and Harris described finding Michael in the chapel with Anna, witnessing his shock at her confession and his subsequent ethical struggle. In 30 years of hospital ministry, I've never seen a physician so torn between professional duty and personal truth, Harris concluded. Dr. Andrews didn't violate ethics. He lived them at great personal cost. The board members exchanged glances, their expressions softening slightly. Director Chen cleared her throat. Thank you, Chaplain. Dr. Andrews will need to deliberate further. In the meantime, you're to maintain professional distance from Mrs. Wilson. Dr. Lawson will oversee her care moving forward. As Michael left the boardroom, Emily was waiting outside, her expression urgent. Anna's asking for you, she said. She remembers you from the chapel and wants to thank the doctor who saved her life. Michael hesitated, torn between the board's directive and his own desperate need for answers. She also mentioned something else, Emily added quietly. She said she knows you're her son. Stunned by Emily's words, Michael stood frozen in the corridor. How could she possibly know? The daisy blanket. She saw it in your office when they were wheeling her past yesterday. Your door was open and she spotted it on your desk. Emily explained. She's been asking for you ever since she regained consciousness. Despite the board's directive, Michael knew he had to see her. After 30 years of questions, the answers were finally within reach. Anna's room was bathed in afternoon sunlight. When he entered, though frail and connected to monitors, she appeared remarkably alert. Her eyes, the same deep blue as his own, widened with recognition. "You really are him," she whispered, her voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed earlier. "My Michael." Approaching her bedside cautiously, he nodded. "How can you be so sure?" Anna's weathered hand reached for his. "A mother knows. Besides, you have your grandfather's chin." A tearful smile crossed her face. "And you kept the blanket. My adoptive parents preserved everything," Michael replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "They wanted me to have something from my birth family. They sound like wonderful people." "They were. They passed away a few years ago." Michael pulled a chair closer. "But they always encouraged me to find you if I wanted to." Anna's expression crumpled with remorse. "I never stopped thinking about you. Every birthday, every Christmas, I lit a candle and said a prayer for you." The silence between them hung heavy with 3 decades of separation. Michael had rehearsed this moment countless times in his imagination, sometimes with anger, sometimes with forgiveness, but always with questions. "Why?" he finally asked, the single word containing a lifetime of wondering. Anna closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. "I was 18, alone, and desperately poor. Your father had abandoned us when he learned I was pregnant. My parents had disowned me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I lived in my car for the last 2 months of my pregnancy." The hospital room seemed to shrink around them as Anna continued her story. She had delivered Michael during a snowstorm, alone with just a kind nurse who stayed past her shift. With no home, no job, and no support, she made the heartbreaking decision to leave him, where he would be found quickly and cared for properly. "I chose this hospital because my cousin had given birth here and said the nurses were angels," Anna explained. "I knew they would find you a good home." Michael listened silently. 30 years of imagined scenarios giving way to the harsh reality of a desperate young woman's impossible choice. "I named you Michael after my grandfather, the only person in my family who had ever shown me real kindness," she continued. "And I left my mother's handkerchief with the daisy embroidery, so you'd have something beautiful." Outside, the Founders' Week celebration continued, a choir rehearsing in the atrium below. The irony wasn't lost on Michael. A week meant to celebrate. Hospital births had indeed reunited a mother and son, though not in the way anyone could have anticipated. "I came back to Boston last month after selling my house in Maine," Anna said. "I'd been having chest pains for years but ignored them. When the doctor told me I might not have much time left, I decided to try to find you before." She left the sentence unfinished. "And instead, I found you," Michael said softly. Anna squeezed his hand. "You didn't just find me, Michael. You saved me." The monitors beeped steadily in the background, each sound a reminder of the fragile thread that had brought them back together, and how easily it might have broken. Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock. Director Chen entered, her expression severe as she took in the scene. "Dr. Andrews, I believe you were instructed to maintain distance from this patient." Before Michael could respond, Anna spoke up. "He's my son," she stated firmly, "and I requested to see him." The director's stern demeanor faltered slightly. "I see. Nevertheless, there are protocols." "With all due respect," Michael interjected, rising to his feet, "I'm here as Anna's son, not as her doctor. Dr. Lawson is managing her care as directed." Director Chen studied them both, then nodded curtly. "The board has reached a decision regarding your case. We'll need to see you in 15 minutes. After she left, Anna clutched Michael's hand. "What will they do to you? Your career?" "Don't worry about that now," he assured her, though worry gnawed at his own stomach. The grant, his position, the research he'd dedicated his life to, all hung in the balance. When Michael entered the boardroom for the second time that day, he was surprised to find Emily and Chaplain Harris present alongside the board members. Director Chen began without preamble. "Dr. Andrews, after careful consideration, The board recognizes the extraordinary circumstances surrounding Mrs. Wilson's case. While we maintain that proper protocol would have been to recuse yourself immediately, we acknowledge the Ethics Committee's emergency approval and the successful outcome." Michael held his breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "However," Chen continued, "there must be consequences for the initial breach. You will be placed on administrative leave for 1 month, during which time Dr. Lawson will assume your duties." Lawson couldn't quite hide his satisfied smile. "Additionally," Chen added, "your candidacy for the National Heart Grant will be withdrawn." The blow hit hard. 5 years of research, potentially life-saving innovations, all sacrificed. "I understand," Michael said quietly. As the meeting concluded, Lawson approached him. "For what it's worth, I would have done the same thing in your position." He extended his hand. "The grant project won't suffer. I'll make sure your research protocols are followed precisely." Outside, in the hallway, Emily waited. "I've been thinking about what you did for Anna," she said. "It inspired me to finally contact the adoption agency about my own birth parents." 3 weeks later, as Boston Mercy's Founders Week came to a close, Michael and Anna sat together in the hospital garden. Her recovery had been remarkable. She would be discharged the following day. "I sold my house in Maine," Anna explained, watching butterflies dance among the late-blooming flowers. "I was going to use the money to travel, trying to find you. Now, I'm thinking about something different." She described her dream of establishing a foundation to help young mothers in crisis, women like she had been, desperate and alone. "I thought perhaps, if you were willing, we could do it together," she suggested hesitantly. "The Wilson Andrews Foundation." Michael smiled, the weight of 30 years of questions finally lifted from his shoulders. "I think that's a perfect use for your house money and for the savings I've set aside for my sabbatical year." The following spring, a small clinic opened its doors 3 blocks from Boston Mercy Hospital. A sign above the entrance read, "The Wilson Andrews Family Clinic, where every heart matters." Inside, Dr. Michael Andrews treated patients 2 days. A week while Anna Wilson greeted nervous young mothers in the waiting room, and hanging in the reception area, preserved in a simple frame, was a handmade baby blanket embroidered with daisies, a reminder that sometimes the most painful goodbyes can lead to the most beautiful new beginnings. On the clinic's first anniversary, as Michael watched Anna helping a teenage mother soothe her fussy newborn, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. One woman's desperate act of love 30 years ago, one doctor's ethical dilemma, and the remarkable healing power of truth and forgiveness had created something neither could have imagined, a second chance at family and a legacy of hope for others facing impossible choices.